You guys know what's so fascinating to me? Sleeper spies. Sleeper spies are undercover agents placed inside of a foreign country who are told to do nothing practically, just live a normal life until they are activated and then given a mission. They blend in completely, they get jobs, they make friends, they raise families for years, sometimes decades. They look like ordinary people. Until one day, someone wakes them up and says, now we need you to do something. The whole point is that by the time that they're activated, they are so embedded into society that nobody would suspect them. Jack Barsky was one of them. In 1955, a 10-year-old little boy named Jack Barsky passed away in the suburbs of Washington, D.C. His family laid him to rest and held a beautiful service for him. Many years later, Jack Barsky appeared again as a man in his 30s living in the States with a mission to accomplish. And the passport this man held with the name Jack Barsky was not a fake one. The man whose real name was Albert Dietrich, I think you pronounce it, was Jack Barsky in the eyes of the U.S. government. And it all dates back to the late 1960s, early 1970s when this man, Albert Dietrich, was living in a small East German town on track to become a chemistry professor at a university, which was his dream job. But he was recruited by agents who had been watching him, paying attention to him. Without him knowing, he was practically auditioning to see if he had what it took to become a secret spy. A very powerful intelligence agency in East Germany decided that he was the one, that he was special enough, smart enough, good enough to pull off something that most people cannot do. So this stranger knocked on his dorm room one day, and East German secret police asks him a few questions to kind of just feel him out, nothing crazy, asked him about his career, what he hopes to do with it, and he likes what he says, so he ends up inviting him to dinner. At dinner at this restaurant, a second man appears, Russian, speaking German with a very heavy accent. He was KGB. KGB was basically Russian secret spy agency. They had two main jobs, spy on other countries and spy on their own people to make sure that nobody was speaking out against the government. But when they were recruiting him, they didn't call him a spy. They liked to say that he was a scout for peace. So sitting across from him, the KGB officer made him an offer. Go to America, live there, not for a short mission, but for years, become someone else entirely in the US and then work against it from the inside, because to them, the US was the enemy. And he accepted, quote, I was sent to the United States to establish myself as a citizen and then make contact to the extent possible at the highest levels possible of decision makers, particularly political decision makers. His training began in early 1973. Albert told his family that he was leaving university and moving to Berlin to go to work. In reality, he was beginning his KGB training. As part of his training, he was put in situations designed to see if he could lie under pressure, hold a secret, and stay calm when everything was on the line. He passed every single test. And then the real training began. He was taught Morse code, cryptography, important to learn so that he could receive coded messages through shortwave radio. He was trained in surveillance detection, invisible ink, taught how to hide and retrieve packages from concealed location, how to detect when he was being followed. Like some days he would just be out walking around and they would put a surveillance team on him of about 8 people that would follow him around. Some days they would, some days they wouldn't, but it was up to him to learn when he was being followed. But arguably the most important skill that he had to learn was English, how to speak it, how to understand it, read it, how to have no accent. He was learning about 100 new English words every single day. He learned not only how to sound American, but how to act like it. They even sent him to Canada for 3 months just to practice being American. He would eat ham and cheese at diners. He would watch The Price is Right. He absorbed the culture like a professional actor. Then they gave him his identity, Jack Barsky. Jack Barsky was chosen when an embassy official had been walking through a cemetery and spotted a headstone. Jack Philip Barsky passed away in 1955, age 10. They got his birth certificate and they built up this fake story around his name, down to the schools that he attended, any past addresses that he lived at, a fake family. His mother was a German-born mother, just in case he had to explain any remaining traces of any accent left in his voice. And when he was ready, they gave him yet another fake identity. He was a Canadian named William Dyson, and he headed off to the airport. He was 29 years old at this point, I believe, in 1978. He bought a ticket to Mexico City, then Toronto, then Chicago, and he describes the moment that he landed at the Chicago airport as the most intense 60 minutes of his life. He had a high-end shortwave radio and thousands of dollars in cash. Walking through customs, he felt, in his own words, like he had a neon sign around his neck that said, watch out for this guy. But nobody stopped him, nobody questioned him. He told the passport officer that he was a Canadian tourist stopping over for a couple days just to sightsee. They stamped him through and sent him on his way. 2 days later, alone in a Chicago hotel room, he burned the Canadian passport, he burned his return ticket home, and just like that, William Dyson was now gone, like he never existed. And he was now Jack Barsky with a legitimate birth certificate, and he ended up moving to New York. And what he was tasked with to do in the States was, in simple terms, get close to power. The KGB's main goal was was for Jack Barsky to work his way into the inner circles of American political decision makers. His number one target was a national security advisor, a specific man that he was assigned to get close to. The Soviets wanted eyes and ears inside the highest of levels of US foreign policy. But the plan failed, the mission failed, because they didn't really give him good instructions on what he was supposed to do, how exactly he was supposed to apply for a passport, how he was supposed to get into these inner circles of these people, all while trying to create a footprint in America so that he wouldn't look suspicious. The first thing that Jack Barsky needed to do was get a paper trail, but because he had not been fully prepared for the very specific challenges of establishing an American identity from scratch, the first 18 months or so were so difficult for him. He started off small. He joined the American Museum of Natural History, got a membership card that gave him a legitimate piece of paper with the name Jack Barsky on it. Then he got a public library card and then a driver's license. The social security card was the hardest, but he eventually discovered that farm workers historically had not been required to present a social security card when they were hired. He used that loophole to get his first job and then work backward to obtain a number through the system. He got a job as a bicycle messenger in Manhattan, and that in itself honestly was a strategy because he was riding around all day learning the streets of New York, and he was also interacting with people who didn't ask him any questions, so he was able to listen and learn and become familiar with life as an American, but still managed to avoid answering specific questions. Then he eventually landed on the lie that he had had a tough start in life in New Jersey and had dropped out of high school. He said that he then worked on a remote farm for years before deciding to, quote, give life another chance by moving to the big city. So his story was that he had no social security number because up until that point in his life, he hadn't needed it because he worked as a farmer. So he now really had an identity. He had a job. He even enrolled in college, but at nighttime when he was alone in his apartment, he was doing his actual job. And part of his actual job included identifying possible KGB spies that they could recruit, likely college students, and he would get their information and then send that back to Moscow. So every Thursday night, Jack Barsky would spend hours in his apartment decoding shortwave radio transmissions from Moscow Center. The messages would come in bursts of encrypted numbers. He decoded them using one-time pads, sheets of code that once used were destroyed. He would then communicate back to them using shortwave radio and secret letters, sending information not only about potential recruit members, but also reporting on American public sentiment about current events and Soviet foreign policy, letting them know if there were any signs that Americans were preparing for war. He also was constantly on the lookout for any signals from KGB. For example, sometimes the KGB left painted signals in the subway station, meaning we need you, be at X, Y, and Z location in 2 hours. Or there was also a very big sign that he had to be on the lookout for, which was a dab of red paint on a metal beam. If he ever saw that, he knew that that was a sign for danger. But somewhere in the middle of this, something went horribly wrong, or right, depending on how you look at it, because Jack Barsky fell for America. It started very slowly, the way most big changes do. He had arrived in the United States expecting to find the country that they had described to him, which was a brutal, evil society. But what he found instead was something that confused him and disoriented him, a place of genuine warmth and people who were just human beings, just like him. And then Jack Barsky fell in love. He met a woman, they got married, and she fell pregnant. Their daughter, Chelsea, was born in 1987, and as soon as he looked into her eyes, he knew that this life of being a secret spy was no longer for him. But there was a small problem, because what Jack Barsky did not tell his wife, what he didn't tell anyone, was that he already had a family back in East Germany under his real name. He had a wife and a son that had been born in 1981. So he quite literally was living 3 separate lives, but he was so used to it that it wasn't hard for him, because in his head, these 3 separate identities that he had, that he was living under, did not know each other because they couldn't. But at that time in his life, with Chelsea in his arms in his New York apartment, he understood with absolute clarity which life he was intending to keep. He hadn't planned to become a father. The KGB definitely had not planned for him to become a father, but Chelsea changed everything for him. In early December of 1988, Jack Barsky saw the red paint on the subway platform. It was a pre-arranged emergency signal, one that he had been trained to recognize and respond to. The message was not a confusing one. It meant that the KGB believed that his cover had been compromised. He needed to run now. His instructions were that if he ever saw that signal, he needed to go because he was in danger. He had to make his way to this one location. In this case, it was a park, and he had to collect an emergency packet of documents, everything that he would need in order to flee under another fake identity and make his way to Canada, where a Russian embassy contact would receive him and facilitate his return to the Soviet Union. He would leave behind his apartment, his job, his wife, his daughter. So he went to that location, but according to him, the package wasn't there. And what he needed to do, what he was trained to do, was inform them to resend whatever they needed to resend, but he didn't. In that moment, he chose his family and he went home instead. That again was a problem because the KGB did not accept silence. A second message came through his shortwave radio: come home home immediately. He ignored it. And then one day, a man appeared in person, a KGB handler sent specifically to deliver the message face to face. He was on a subway. A man came up to him and stood right next to him, whispered in his ear, "If you don't answer back, report back, I have to get rid of you." Jack knew that the KGB would not hesitate for a second to completely eliminate people who knew too much and refused to cooperate. He had no illusions about that, but he had also spent 10 years studying the Soviet system from the inside, and he understood something about it that gave him one slim chance, because the KGB was terrified of AIDS. The AIDS epidemic was sweeping in the United States in the late 1980s, and the Russian leadership was more than convinced that if someone got it, that was it. You were as good as gone. The KGB was incredibly afraid of any of its agents being exposed to it. They couldn't have that. So Jack Barsky told them that he had it and said that he needed to stay in the States to get treatment, and it worked. He was on edge for about a year, but when nothing happened, he knew that he was in the clear. However, the FBI then got word of this Jack Barsky guy who was a spy, and they got eyes on him. Actually, FBI agents rented the house next to his to watch him for a long period of time to make sure that he was the person they were looking for. And he was, and they arrested him, and he told them everything. He had one chance to be honest, and he took it. When he first realized that he was being taken by FBI officers, he said, "Am I under arrest?" He wasn't. They took him to a motel for the weekend, and he told them everything. Every detail checked out. The Cold War was over. The KGB was gone. And Jack Barsky hadn't spied in nearly a decade, so he was never charged with a single crime. He walked out of that motel room and eventually became an American citizen. He gave a ton of valuable information to the FBI, and also later on, the FBI agent who arrested him became one of his closest friends and a godfather to his youngest daughter. And that was that. Yeah, I don't know if this video is gonna seem like kind of random in comparison to the kind of videos that I usually do. I just think that anything in relation to secret spies, sleeper agents is so fascinating to me. Like, I could research this for days and never get bored. And I want to know if you guys have any specific stories involving sleeper agents or secret spies or anything of sorts that relate to true crime that you guys want me to make a video on, because again, I think this is so incredibly fascinating. Anyway, that's all for me today. Thank you guys for sticking around if you made it to the end. Hope you guys are having the best day. If not, go do something to make it the best day, make somebody happy, and I will see you in my next video. Massive kiss on the forehead to every single one of you.